Hey there, and welcome to our last video that introduces pivot tables and pivot charts. In this third video, we're going to look by creating a pivot table to understand how restaurants fall into categories of inexpensive, mid-range, or expensive. So based on these restaurant quality categories, what percent are inexpensive, what percent are mid-range, and what percent are expensive. So let's start by creating our pivot table. So I'm going to begin by putting my cursor in the cell where I want the pivot table to go, and then I'm going to come up here to insert. And what I'm going to do this time is a pivot table. Pivot charts were great here when I wanted a chart in addition to the table, but right now I just want the table. So if I click pivot table, I get the same set of options that I do with the chart. It's the same exact menu. You choose the data that you want to analyze, which is my restaurant quality, price, and time sheet. And then I have to choose where I want to place the table. And I want to place it, my computer's slow. I want to place it right here in this cell, which is F40. And then I'm going to say, okay. And just like with the pivot chart, you're starting to recognize this menu. And now I have a spot. This is where the pivot table is going to go. So what I want to see is I want to look at my quality ratings. And I'm going to move excellent out of the way because we're using that natural sorting, the good, very good, excellent, rather than the alphabetical choice that Excel comes up with the default. But then over here, I want bins. I want to have an inexpensive bin, a mid-range bin, and an expensive bin. And then in these cells, I want to know what percentage of good restaurants are also inexpensive. So in my pivot table field, I'm going to say that I want meal price in my columns. Doing that creates this. This is Excel's default situation where each price option in the original data is represented here across the top. The lowest restaurant price was $10. The highest restaurant price was $48. Instead of having these individually, I want to have them grouped. So to group them, you click on any one of those numbers and then right-click to select it. And you'll get this drop-down menu. And here you've got this option for group. If I click group, I get this grouping menu, or this grouping, I don't even know what you would call it, but how you fill this out is you want to start at the lowest number, 10. It automatically populates that. You want to end at the highest number, 48. And then this by just says, how many prices do you want in each bin? And since I've got to get from 10 to 48 and I want 3 bins, I'm going to put 13 prices in each bin. And then I'll click OK. And now here we have it. We've got an inexpensive bin where meals are $10 to $22, a mid-price bin where meals are $23 to $35, and an expensive bin where meals are $36 to $48. Now we just need to choose what we want in here. I'm just going to drag quality rating down again, and it's going to give me those counts, count of quality rating. In this grand total, we can confirm by coming up and looking here and saying, yes, there are 84 good, 150 very good, and 66 excellent restaurants. Those numbers are matched up here. But I don't want to see the numbers. 56 good restaurants are inexpensive, right? I want to see the percent, because when you're looking at totals that vary, 84, 150, and 66, 56 good restaurants and 56 very good restaurants, that's a lot larger proportion of the good restaurants fall into the inexpensive category than the very good restaurants. I want this to be expressed as a percentage of the total number of restaurants in each category, right? This grand total of this row. So here under values where it says count, I'm going to open this up by hitting the information. If you're on a PC, you might have to play around to get this menu up. But what I want is the count, but I want it to be expressed as a percentage. So here under show data as, the calculation I want is the percent of the row total, right? 56 is what percent of 84? 84 is this row total. So I want to do what percent of the row total, and then I'll say okay. And now I'm going to get rid of all the decimal places on that grand total because that's going to be 100. And then for each of these, I'm going to make there be only one decimal. The thing with tables is that formatting is key to having them be clear. So what this tells us is that 66% of good restaurants, let's just take a look at this row here, 66% of good restaurants, 66.7%, fall into the inexpensive category, whereas 32% of good restaurants fall into the mid-priced category, whereas 1.2% fall in the more expensive category. If we add these numbers up, that will total 100%. So what we can see by looking here is that in the inexpensive price category, 39% of restaurants are in that inexpensive price category, but most of them are just good restaurants. The lowest quality restaurants tend to be less expensive, right? Because the excellent quality restaurants, only 9% of excellent quality restaurants are in this inexpensive bucket. If we jump past the middle range bucket, but then look at the expensive bucket, okay, it wants to highlight both of them. That's what we're getting, but we're going to talk about the restaurants in this $36 to $48 range. A restaurant that's rated good quality, very few restaurants that are only rated good can survive in a market if they're going to charge such high prices for food, right? Whereas a very good restaurant, 12% of very good restaurants are quite expensive, but excellent restaurants, 45% are expensive. And one interesting thing that I note when I'm looking at this data is that excellent restaurants are equally as likely to be mid-range as expensive. So that's what we can see by looking at this data. One thing you'll notice when you're making your own spreadsheet is that when you add pivot tables, it adjusts. Excel will adjust the width of these rows. So after each time, you're going to want to come through and look and see where the width has been messed with by Excel making pivot tables, and then you can just readjust it. And so this is basically our analysis of the relationship between price and restaurant quality on one given survey. And we can see that most restaurants are rated very good, and relatively the smallest number are rated excellent. Prices at excellent restaurants tend to be higher. However, we can see that not all excellent restaurants are high priced. About 10% are actually still in this low price category. So that's what we did. You're going to do the same thing where you're going to analyze wait times, and I'll provide that Excel sheet for you. So happy calculating. Email me if you have any questions.